Now, let's speak to the boss man of Film4, shall we? Who, may I say, is sporting a quite extraordinary beard. And as someone who has grey and black in his own beard, both of us together look like badgers doing a handstand if we were placed together. Daniel, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that. I think that was a compliment.
It was a compliment. The beard is fantastic. I mean, how do people react to your beard, people who've known you for some time, when they see you perhaps after a while?
Well, my mother doesn't approve, of course.
Yeah, my mother doesn't either. Yeah.
But otherwise, it seems to go down fairly well.
Good to hear it. Well, look, you're having a good time, aren't you? Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, just won 5 BAFTAs, and the red-hot favourite to scoop Best Picture at the Oscars. Are you a betting man, Daniel?
I'm not. I'm very superstitious, and I don't like to hear those odds at all. I'd rather just assume that everything is written in the stars.
It's interesting you say that you're not a betting man, because, of course, the business that you're in, you do have to take bets with rather a lot of money, don't you? Because there's no guarantee just because you put $5-10 million into a film that it will make that money back.
That's very true. Hopefully those are calculated bets based on, my experience and my knowledge of the film business and working with filmmakers who are very, very talented, like Martin Mcdormand, and who you can put your trust and faith in.
Trust and faith is very, very important. Relationships important. And you've been in this game a long time. So how did you end up getting into the film business?
By accident, really. I was completely obsessed with film. And I thought the best way of getting into the movie business was to go and work in an Italian restaurant in Sydney, where many of the filmmakers that I loved at the time used to sort of go and have a cup of cappuccino or whatever. And eventually one of them was persuaded by me to give me a job. So
obsessed with film tells me that you're obsessed with the artistry of making films, and you've always been very, very clear on that. It's about the artistry, it's about the creativity. But of course you also have to be a businessman. And there is a friction sometimes between art and business, isn't there?
Oh, there always is, and the film business is one of the key areas where that happens. And yes, you know, when you're making decisions about films, you are trying to balance the heart with the head. You're always trying to work out whether, if just because you love it, whether you're going to be able to persuade audiences that they should love it too. So it's always making that calculation, but trying for it not to be a calculation, because if you allow that to happen, then I think you get rather boring, dull films and not necessarily successful ones. I think you have to go with the things that make you the most passionate.
Is there an algorithm? Because we live in a world now which is increasingly relying, I know a lot about the music business and the Spotifys and Deezers and its algorithms and its data, constantly looking at the data and what works and what doesn't work. So how much room is there left for instinct in that?
I mean, yes, of course there are algorithms. Of course there's knowledge and experience, and there's, studying the box office and studying budgets for films and what makes a film profitable and what doesn't and what do audiences want, et cetera, et cetera. And you have to feed that into any decision-making process. But again, I don't think films, unlike cars, are things where you can just take the various pieces of material, put them together, shine it up and send it out there, and it will automatically find an audience. I mean, you have to bring a lot more thought and care and attention into it than you would if there's no such thing as a factory-made film, basically. I mean, there are various
Marvel.
Yeah, I was just I could hear that.
You bowl it, I'll bat it.
Yes, exactly. You were just a little bit ahead of me. Yes, there are some formulae that are certainly proving to be incredibly successful at the moment. Marvel comic films are, don't seem to have an end to their sort of box office cycle. They seem to be, each one seems to be more successful than the last. But apart from that, I mean, there are very few Pixar movies, Disney movies, but there are very few other types of films that you can take to the bank as successfly as those have been. There's a lot more variety out there. Some work, some don't, but there are very few other movies that you can just guarantee are going to work.
Were you there at the beginning of the process for Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, or was your predecessor David Koss involved with the initial conversations?
No, David Koss and David Abrahams were involved in the initial conversations, and I came in pre-production. What
is it about Martin, the director, that you love so much?
I mean, I'm a great fan of black comedy just as a genre.
Well, you wanted In Bruges to be on Miramax when you were there, didn't you?
That is very true. That is very true. In fact, I fought bitterly. I mean, that's yes.
It leaves a bad taste in your mouth just thinking about it.
Well, I mean, I'm on a campaign to make sure that I work with every filmmaker who's sort of passed me over in the past, and Martin is definitely one of those. Yeah, no, I love his view of the world. I love his dialogue. As I say, he's very good at satire and black comedy and irony. He builds brilliant characters, as Three Billboards, and in fact in Bruges. I mean, as you know, Film4 have been a supporter of Martin's right back to his first short, and then through In Bruges, and then through Seven Psychopaths. And I think there's a continuity and there's a specificity about the way in which Martin works, which I just find absolutely fascinating. And he does create these worlds and create these characters that they are larger than life characters, but then that's part of what you go to the cinema to see if you're going to see a drama as opposed to a documentary.
Indeed. Well, let's hear a clip from Three Billboards and two of these larger-than-life characters, Woody Harrelson and Frances McDormand.
Hey there, Mildred. So we're going to have to bring you in, I'm afraid.
There you go, Woody Harrelson and Frances McDormand there in Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. The BAFTA winning, of course. And I won't keep going on about tipped for an Oscar because it makes Daniel a bit twitchy every time we mention that it's been tipped highly for it. What part of the process do you love the most, Daniel?
Well, funnily enough, I can tell you the bit I like the least,
yes.
Which is sort of weird given the businesses that I'm in, and that is going on movie sets. I find no joy in that whatsoever.
Why?
Mainly because I always seem to be in the wrong place and get shouted at. I'm always tripping over cables, and it's an incredibly long and, in my opinion, dull process, the actual physical production of film. As I'm sure people know, there are multiple takes of each scene, often filmed completely out of order. It's very hard to sort of get a feel for the narrative thrust of a movie from being on a movie set. So that I definitely don't count as one of the things I love about the business or about working with film. I mean, I'm really very I love the sort of process of creating a film from an idea or from a screenplay and making something that I see potential into something that I feel can actually be greenlit. That's a really exciting part of the process. It brings you into direct contact with your writer or your writer and director, or that often can be the same person. So I find that absolutely fascinating. And then I guess at the other end, I'm a distributor at heart. So the taking something that I've been involved in creating and then finding a way to persuade audiences that they should participate in it, given everything that audiences have these days in taking their eyeballs and their attention in the entertainment world and in the world as a whole. That process I find both fascinating, often frustrating, but really you get a tremendous sense of achievement, on opening night of a movie, and you go down to your local cinema, which I still do, and you see, a line of people around the block. I mean, that's a really great feeling.
We live in an age, of course, through Instagram and through other types of social media where the word celebrity is perhaps devalued, as it was. So then, who do you think still has that star quality? You've been in plenty of rooms with very, very famous film stars. Which are the ones that make your head turn?
Well, I don't want to sound blasé. Very few movie stars make my head turn. I'm more.
I bet if Didier Drogba walked into a room, you'd be.
Well, that's. I was just going on to say that. I mean,
right.
I'm very into sports and football in particular.
You're a massive Chelsea fan.
I'm a massive Chelsea fan,
Bad
which
weekend.
thus a very depressed one. But yes, any Chelsea player, past or present, is the sort of person that I find it almost impossible to string a sentence together when I'm speaking to. Movie stars, I don't want to sound blasé, but I've been around all my life, so I find it quite easy to to not be starstruck. I'm more starstruck by filmmakers that I really, really admire. I'm a huge fan of Chris Nolan. If I see him across the room, that will get my heart racing.
Danny Boyle, Steve McQueen, lots of great filmmakers.
I find them, absolutely fascinating. If my favorite filmmaker of all time, not alive right now, but if I had an opportunity to do one of those dinner parties, then I would definitely have Stanley Kubrick at that.
Wow, yes. Just a bit of breaking news, actually, at 19 minutes past 2. Leicestershire police say that 5 people have now died after an explosion at a shop in Leicester last night. 5 other people remain in hospital, 1 in a critical condition. Superintendent Shane O'Neill said police believe there may be more people unaccounted for and rescue efforts are continuing. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from that in the news in about 10 minutes' time. Back to Daniel Battsek now, who is, of course, the boss man of Film4. It's interesting that Three Billboards was the first time that Film4 did a 50-50 co-production. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So more investment, bigger risk. I mean, what kind of pressure does that put on Film4, but also on the director itself?
I'm going to doubt very much whether it bothered Martin one way or another. Just so long as he was getting his movie made,
Okay.
He's got enough to worry about without caring whether we make our investment back. Although he's a big supporter of Film4, and we have a strategy that was brought in a couple of years ago to make these bigger investments. They are bigger risk. They are bigger reward when it works. But we have to calculate that very carefully because we're a not-for-profit organization. All the profit that we make filters back into Film4 and enables us to do the other very, very important part of the overall sort of filmmaking equation, which is to support first-time filmmakers and diverse filmmakers and filmmakers that would not have the opportunity to make their movies if it wasn't for an organization like Film4, or in fact, if it wasn't for Film4. And at the BAFTAs, as excited and proud and happy as I was that the success that Three Billboards had, I was equally proud of the fact that one of our filmmakers that we've supported, Rangana Nyoni's film, I'm Not a Witch, also won a BAFTA. And that was, that is the other side of what we do when we're not taking these bigger risks. We're taking, in a way they're as risky because you're backing a first-time filmmaker, but it's a very different equation.
Danny, you said I've been keen to find movies that are diverse in every sense of the word, potentially commercial projects in addition to Oscar films. Now, with Three Billboards making $100 million, you've hit the holy grail of both. But, potentially, we don't know quite yet whether it's going to win an Oscar, but it's certainly won plenty of awards. Does it have to be... Is it more likely to be an either-or, that you're going to get one that the film festivals love and the journalists love, but that doesn't necessarily mean the public will?
I would say on the whole, because we are very much in the quality filmmaking zone, that if we get one, we hopefully will get the other. It doesn't automatically go like that, but we're trying very hard not only to be financially successful, but also to make films that are of a quality and both from a critical point of view and from the various awards prognosticators that we have films that stand a chance in that arena.
If a film that you've been involved in gets a roasting, how personally do you take it?
Very. It really hurts. It really hurts. There are certain reviews of certain films that I've been involved with over the years that I can, if I wake up in a cold sweat, I can remember them almost word for word.
Wow, that personally?
Very, very much so. I mean, in some cases, it's actually led me to, I wouldn't say be friendly with the critic in the particular case, but there was a New York Times film critic who wrote a horrific review of a film that I was involved with that I was very, very close to, called Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And it sort of created a strange sort of friendship between us. Whenever I see her, she sort of looks at me at first with a slight fear in her eye, and then realizes that I'm basically friendly, and we have a chat about whatever other films are showing at that particular festival.
So you've never gone crazy with power and insisted on journalists being barred from film screenings because they've been horrible to a film that you've been involved in?
Not at all. I mean, I'm actually, despite the fact that you do have to take the odd slings and arrows, I'm a huge supporter of film critics, and I think it's very sad that so many film critics have sort of lost the aura that they once had in the national papers, both here and in the US, and sort of the kind of the default to the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think, is not a good thing at all. I much prefer the day where individual critics had their point of view, and you really you wanted to know what Pauline Kael or various other film critics, Alexander Walker in his day, had to say about a particular film, even if it was critical of a film that you were involved with.
And we, of course, have Mark Kermode here on 5 Live.
Indeed. I mean, I would really... again, I've had some savage reviews from Mark in my time, but I'd rather that than he was just one of an algorithm, as you were referring to earlier, that appears on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's what people use as their guide to going to the cinema.
Now, it's impossible for you to have a conversation with anyone other than your close friends and family without Netflix and Amazon being mentioned, I can imagine, these days, because of their sheer spending power, which you can't hope to compete with, can you, at Film4? So where is the USP going forward when you yourself have talked about, one of the minuses of being in your job is nurturing somebody and then them going off and saying, oh, Netflix just agreed to finance it 100%, sorry, but I can't work with you, even though you've spent that time nurturing them?
I mean, listen, it's a
marketplace.
Yeah, it's a marketplace. We cannot compete, you're right. In terms of financial muscle power, we absolutely can't compete. I think for a start, I do think there are filmmakers, both young and experienced, who still believe very firmly in the theatrical experience for their films. They make films to be shown in the cinema, and Netflix, of course, can't guarantee that. And I think that gives us a major point of difference. That isn't going to stop anyone. There will still be times where filmmakers decide that they could put that aside just to get their film made. We've found on the whole that, filmmakers that we've nurtured would like wherever possible to involve us. Steve McQueen, you mentioned earlier, his latest film is a big budget studio film, but he's still found a place for us in that. That's Widows, which is coming up later. Danny Boyle, you mentioned as well. I mean, Trainspotting 2, there was no need for Danny to involve Film4 in that because Sony were paying for the whole film, but he insisted that we were part of that, that we had a seat at the table. So I think by building those relationships with filmmakers, our hope is that even if they do disappear into Amazon, Netflix world or into US studio world, they will still, wherever possible, try to involve Film4 in their latest projects.
Someone once said about the record industry, if you want loyalty, get a dog. Clearly, in the film industry, there is loyalty, plenty of it there for Film4, and love for Film4.
I believe there is. There's evidence that there is, anyway.
Good. In terms of where we are now, and again, this is an inevitability talking to someone with your amount of experience in the film industry, where we are with the power relationship between those wanting to get into the industry, those who hold the power in the industry, and the few of those, and of course Harvey Weinstein is someone you knew well, who is willing to exploit that. Do you think that is over, that the Me Too, that the change that we've seen, I was at the Brits last week and we were all wearing the white flowers, the white roses. Do you think it's done now, that no longer can a man exert that kind of power to exploit people?
I doubt that it's done because although Harvey Weinstein was the most radical version of that sort of power-based relationship, there are plenty of other people, not only in the film business, for sure, who operate in a similar fashion. I mean, as I say, not hopefully not as with the same sort of intent that Harvey had. But I do think that it has woken a lot of people up to how totally unacceptable anything along that entire scale is, and that, people will speak up immediately that they experience anything like that, and thus it will be sort of shouted out before it has an opportunity to kind of fester. That's my hope. I just don't know whether this will be something that that is sustained over time. I certainly hope that it will be.
Were you surprised by the revelations about Harvey Weinstein? You knew him. You were in the same industry as him. Of course, you joined Miramax after he had left Miramax. But did it surprise you, or was it well known how he would use his power?
I mean, I was not surprised to hear that people felt they'd been bullied by him, that he, that he used his power to get his way. I mean, he was particularly serious offender in that arena, but I've come across plenty of people who operate in a similar fashion. No, I knew nothing about what he's been accused of in terms of sexual harassment, rape, being a sexual predator. That's just not anything that I was ever a party to. I mean, partly, as I say, because I never worked for him. And in fact, when I went to run Miramax, that was when he exited. So I took over a brand, but not a company.
Was the company, because of course it had been his company, when you come in to run a company, they often say that a company is defined by the person who runs it. So how did you find the company, consider it was run by someone who had that kind of personality and who was willing to use his power in such negative ways?
I mean, literally when I started my time at Miramax, it was just me. I was brought in and I was given the brand and I built it back up again. As time went by, I did hire quite a few people who had worked for the old Miramax, and they were a bit like people who'd been, in the trenches. They were sort of definitely had been damaged mentally. I mean, that was the only sort of thing that I could tell from them is that they really felt like they'd been through a trauma, basically, just having to work for someone like that day in, day out. But again, because I guess I could not be more different from that, I found that people came out of their shells fairly quickly and operated, normally as you would in a company like that.
So you came to it with the bizarre idea that being good to people and encouraging them brings the best out of them as opposed to bullying them.
Weird, I know,
weird.
But it's worked for me.
What a weird, and carrying on with that theme in many ways, I mean, you just said that you've met people who operate in the same way that Harvey Weinstein did. How did you deal with them? How did you deal with people who felt that just by being the loudest and the most rambunctious and the most intimidating person in the room, they could get their way with you?
I guess either deliberately or just because that's instinctively, I tend to diffuse situations. I'm not a shouter, although my kids might claim.
I bet when you're at Stamford Bridge, you've done a bit of shouting, especially recently.
I believe there's places that shouting is acceptable,
yeah.
but I never ever shout in the workplace. And if I'm shouted at, I will just leave the room. It just is just. I've never known it to be in any way productive, and so I would just walk away from it.
Lots of films on the slate, Daniel. You're a very, very busy guy. And such a diversity of creativity. I'm particularly interested because I'm a football fan like you and Asif Kapadia, and I interviewed Asif a little while ago, and he said to me straight after the interview he was going to finish the edit on Maradona. I mean, this is going to be extraordinary, isn't it?
Did he tell you when he was going to finish the edit?
Oh, this is awkward. This is awkward. Is it? Well, I think I'm going to say that he's running on Asian time. So as and when he finishes, he's an artist. This is another thing, actually, Daniel, about this conversation between art, this friction between art and business, isn't it? Is getting the guy to finish the thing or the woman to finish the thing. because, of course, you need it to be out at a certain time. You've got quarters, profits and income that you need to look at. But also, it needs to be the best film possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And joking aside, Asif has got plenty of movies under his belt that I hugely admire. And as long as he needs to take, he should take. But yes, you know, when you're producing a film, and with a documentary, it has a different cycle altogether from a feature film. But even so, one is planning, you know, which festival are you going to launch it at? You have distributors that have bought the film around the world that need to plan their release dates and stuff. So you need to have a rough idea of when the film is going to emerge.
Have you ever had a falling out with the director?
I haven't fallen out with the director. Directors have fallen out with me.
What kind of way of spin is that, you Alistair Campbell, you?
Well, I think more they have assumed that I have, you know, maybe not worked or not made the right decisions on behalf of their film. I mean, you very often hear after a film's release, especially if it hasn't worked, and this is more when I was a distributor, that, you know, the wrong poster was used, the wrong trailer, the wrong release date. It's never the film. It's always down to a distribution mistake or other. And so there have been times where I've definitely known filmmakers who have blamed me. I mean, not quite as sort of specifically as that, but there's a feeling that the decisions were made about their precious movie. Had they been different, then it would have been a wild success.
Are you good at moving on to the next one? Because I interviewed Maurizio Pochettino recently for Football Focus. I'm a Spurs fan, and so that was a good day out. Mm-hmm. And I was asking him about the mood he's in when Spurs lose. Thankfully, something that doesn't happen very often. But and he said that, you know, his family can't talk to him. He has to be alone. He's an absolute nightmare to be around. Similarly, with your good self, you know, if something that you've put a lot of time and passion and energy and really believe in, and it just doesn't work commercially, do you just say philosophically, well, you know, it just didn't connect with the audience, move on, or do you take it to heart?
The latter.
Just like with critics. Right?
Yeah, sort of weekends. I mean, you've brought football back into the conversation, which I have no issue with, except right at this moment. Yes, but weekends, you know, which are supposed to be enjoyable, restful periods, are the complete opposite for me, because there's football, and you know, a win or a loss will totally change my mood for the weekend. And also for movies, the weekend is where movies are made or broken.
Is it really still that case? That
Absolutely. So whether you're going on a you know, kind of what they describe as a platform release, where you're just releasing in one or two cinemas and you're using the momentum from that weekend to build a release around, or whether you're going on a wide release, there are so many factors that can come into play that can, you know, decide the fate of a film between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning. And so, yeah, so weekends, which you know, one should be able to enjoy, I often don't.
And what about the casting of stars now, specifically after, say, for instance, the prime example of this is Kevin Spacey and him having to be taken out of a film, Christopher Plummer put in, reshoots taking place. When it comes to signing talent now, are there extra questions that have to be asked about their prior conduct?
I mean, I'm sure that people are a lot more aware and a lot more concerned about ensuring that, I mean, it doesn't have to be the people, you know, in front of the camera. I mean, it's also the people behind the camera, that they have reputations that are that you know, that are clean. But I think the whole star system has changed so dramatically over the last, you know, 5 to 10 years, whereby, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, there are fewer and fewer bankable box office stars now. It's much more about franchises, about the product itself, about the movies themselves. And there are very, very few actors or actresses who you could hang a movie on and just know that it's going to be successful at the box office.
So, I mean, I asked this question before, but I am keen to still, because I know you said it's footballers that make you tongue-tied, but that star quality, I mean, Frances McDormand is a one-off, isn't she? She's extraordinary.
She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And I think the fact that she obviously chooses her parts so carefully. She does, she doesn't do a whole load of movies. She's very reticent about publicizing those movies. And, it keeps that mystique about a person, which then enables them to completely embody a character so that you don't see the joint at all. All you're watching is Frances McDormand's character, Mildred, in that film. You're not, or Margie in Fargo, you're not aware of her as a person or a personality. And I think that's what makes a really fine actor or actress.
Interesting that you brought up reticent to do publicity, because we were talking to Russell Crowe on this show, and he was talking about how he's less keen to do these big films because of the kind of marketing and handshaking and schmoozing that needs to be done around kind of Oscar season, that kind of lobbying that has to be done. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, it's hard to be sympathetic in
it is indeed. Yes.
Although I do, in that, there are, it's not that hard a life, but I do have a certain amount of sympathy for just the sheer amount of time in terms of between the moment a film is originally launched. I mean, Three Billboards was originally launched at the Venice Film Festival last September, and it's the Oscars next weekend. And throughout that period, everyone involved in the film has been on the road one way or another. So I do have some sympathy towards that, because what else can they do during that time? They have to stay attached to the particular film. But hopefully they'll manage to just keep their enthusiasm going for a few more days. That's all we're asking.
Now, my next guest, the actor Johnny Harris, has just walked in and is sitting next to you. Johnny, meet Daniel Battsek, the boss of Film4. Have you met before, you two?
No, never.
Don't think
pleasure.
so.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're shaking hands here for the viewers.
Quality beard game. Johnny's probably having envy of Daniel's beard right now.
Yeah, I feel quite naked, yeah.
It's not as good. And Johnny, we will be coming to you in a minute. Do not worry about that. Fantastic actor that you are. Lastly, Daniel, just want to talk about some of that slate. I've mentioned Maradona, As If Capadia's documentary, but it's not just documentaries. In fact, let's play a little clip of one of the films that you've got slated for this year. This is Mary Magdalene, coming soon from Film4. Now, this is starring Rooney Mara and Joaquin Phoenix. In a shock move there, Mary Magdalene, not in Aramaic. You decided to keep that English, keep it nice and simple.
Keep it nice and simple.
Yeah.
It's Garth Davis who last year had that wonderful film Lion, with Dev Patel and Nicole Kidman, and it's a really, it's a well-known story, but a really pared down and very, very interesting take on it. It's a wonderful film.
And what else, Daniel, this year? What are you most excited about? Obviously Mary Magdalene, obviously Maradona.
I mean, we've got some really, really, as you say, a very kind of diverse slate, very interesting films. We've got a wonderful new film, also starring Joaquin Phoenix, as it happens, from the Scottish director Lynn Ramsey, called You Were Never Really Here, which is won awards at Cannes last year and is a really amazing piece of work. We have a film from a British filmmaker, Andrew Hay, called Lean on Pete, with Steve Buscemi and Charlie Plummer. And then, for a complete change of direction, we have a film that actually is a co-production with the Worldwide Wrestling Federation called Fighting with My Family.
Here's a sentence you never thought you'd hear yourself say.
That is well said. Yes, it's a one-off, I would say, in terms of Film4's collaborations. But actually, it comes from a Channel 4 documentary about this very peculiar wrestling troupe out of who were based in Norwich that somehow Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson got to see and became obsessed with and brought to us, and we made this film that Stephen Merchant wrote and directed. It has a wonderful young British actress called Florence Pugh in it, and Nick Frost, Lena Headey. It's really good fun.
And I promise, lastly now, what difference do you think it would make if Film4, Channel 4 had to move out of London?
I thought you'd never ask. I think I like to think that we can continue to make films all around the country, as we have done before, wherever we're based. We've made films in Scotland. We've got films on our lineup that are made in Wales. We've made films in the north of England. There's nothing to prevent us working with filmmakers that come from any part of the country, and I think that will continue wherever we're based.
Okay. Except they don't have a Groucho in Leeds.
I'm not a member.
Yeah, right. Daniel, no, I'm sure you're not. Daniel, thank you for taking time to speak to us today. Very, very interesting indeed. And I'll direct message Asif Kapadia on Twitter to say that you're not happy.
I'm trying to be patient.
Yeah, trying to be patient. It's a virtue, patience, Daniel, especially in the film business.
Need it.
Take care. Daniel Battsek there, the boss man of Film4.